Hi, so this is a short lecture. We are just going to discuss some of the things that we've been discussing a lot in the class discussions, anyhow, but this is more like a formal introduction to those things. These are basically the type ranges and type conversions in C. We have already seen a lot of it during our discussions, but this is just going to be a very formal, a short, just introduction to all those things. So we have not really discussed this, but as in in great detail. But you already know that whenever we declare a variable, this is essentially a name for a location in the memory, right? And this location can store some value. We all know that these values are basically sequence of zeros and ones, just like any other location in memory. So for example, if you have a bit pattern like this 0000 1010, it essentially represents the value 10, right? Because 1010 is the binary equivalent of 10, and since the minimum amount of space that we can take in memory is a byte, which is 8 bits, we have just added 4 leading zeros to it. It's similar, by the way, to how we write decimal numbers if we want to represent them in more number of digits. So you just add more zeros, right? And this is the same thing here. And how about negative numbers? So this is something that we have not discussed in detail. We have discussed something like this in one of the last discussions, where I said that essentially what you do is there are multiple ways to represent negative numbers. What the common way to do that is something known as the 2's complement representation, but we are not going to discuss that because it is slightly more complicated, and I'm just leaving it for your course on switching theory and computer organization. But still, there is one representation that you can very easily understand. It's not used very often, but it's still a simple representation. It's called the sign magnitude representation. So in this representation, what we really do is that whatever number of bits we have for representing an integer, we simply reserve one of the bits, right? Usually the leftmost bit as a sign bit. So sign bit means if that bit is 0, I say that the number is positive, and if that bit is 1, I say the number is negative, right? So in sign magnitude form, minus 10 can be represented as 1 0 0 0 1 0 1 0. So you can see that there is a 1 here now, okay, instead of uh, uh, instead of a 0, we have a 1 on the leftmost bit. This is the difference. Now, how do you do that for real valued variables? Well, real numbers are usually represented by a mechanism. This is not, I don't think we have discussed it in the class, but I probably would have just given you a brief idea. But real numbers are represented using a mechanism where you actually keep two different components of the real number, right? And what these components are, so there is one component known as mantissa. So mantissa is basically the actual real number, right? Of course, it's going to be in the form of a binary number, but basically the actual number, the digits in the number, they form the mantissa part, and not all the digits, but in all but one. I'll just give you an example, and the exponent refers to the power to which the mantissa must be raised, right? Similar to integers, we also use a bit to store the sign of the number, so whether this number is positive or negative. Now, to just to give you an idea, if let us say I want to represent 12.5, I have to first convert it into binary. By the way, even though I did not discuss it in detail in the class, I have given some resources for you guys to study Boolean algebra. So please do go through that if you want to understand how 12.5 became you know uh, 110.1. So this is basically just a conversion from decimal to binary. Okay? And by the way, 3 is 1 1 in binary. So I guess you can understand what where exactly is this coming from. So essentially, this was initially 1 point. Sorry, this was initially 1 point. 1100.1, and what I have done is I've just taken the decimal point here, and this means that I have to shift it by 3 points, right? And that is why I've written is 2 to the 2 raised to power 1 1. This is not 11, by the way. Okay, this is 1 1. This is binary. Okay, So ideally I should have written it 2 to the power 3, something like this, because I'm shifting the decimal point by 3. So this is very similar to the scientific notation, right? You remember how will I write this in scientific notation? I will write it as 1.25 into 10 to the power 1. So this is similar, right? So this was the original number 1100.1, but this becomes 1.1001 into 2 to the power 11, and 11 is essentially 3. Now in scientific notation, what happens is, this is how we work, right? I mean, we essentially keep the decimal just after one digit, right? So essentially there is one digit on the left side of decimal, and then whatever is there, whatever in that number is, we keep it on the right side of the decimal. So on the left side of the decimal I can have anything from 1 to 9. So this is how we represent numbers in scientific notations. Now what happens here is, I'm just going to do exactly the same. I'm just going to bring the decimal point here, so there is just one digit uh, on the left side of the number, and everything else is on the right side. But now the difference in binary system is that this digit can only be 1, right? Because I only have two digits, 0 and 1. If it was 0, then it means that I can probably shift it one more on this side. So I'll keep on shifting it till I get the first one. So then so that I can bring it in something similar to scientific notation. So the only digit that is possible on the left side of decimal is 1. So basically storing this 1 is redundant, right? Because it's implied that there is always going to be a 1 here. So essentially, in order to represent 12.5, all I need to store is just 1001. So everything that is after the decimal point, because whatever is before the decimal point, that is implied. I already know that it is 1. And similarly, if I also store this exponent, 1 1 in binary format, which is basically equivalent of 3, if I have these two information, 1001 and 11, with the help of this I can reconstruct this, and with the help of this I can reconstruct this. So this is the idea of mantissa and exponent. Um, so basically in the above example, 1001 is my mantissa and 11 is my exponent. Of course I have not added the leading zeros here, but if I have to use up more bits in order to save this exponent and mantissa, I'll have to just add more zeros here. Again, the actual representation will be in the 2's complement forms, and that we are not going to discuss. But this is just to give you an idea that how exactly a real number gets represented into zeros and ones. So this is something that I think we have not discussed in detail in the class, so I just spent a bit more time here. But the concept of a range of a variable, that you guys already know. Just still I'm going to talk about it. So what happens is, you understand that in order to represent any number in zeros and ones, I'm just simply going to use some number of bits, right? And because the number of bits are going to be fixed, for example, if I'm using an integer, and an integer takes up four bytes of spaces in your memory, then basically you are only having 32 bits. Now if the number of bits are fixed, the possible number of combinations that you can represent with them, and that also is fixed, right? So for example, if you have only 2 bits, then there are only 4 possible combinations that you can store, right? 0 0 0 1 1 0 and 1 1. So there cannot be a fifth number that I can represent using using only 2 bits. So in fact, in general, if you have n bits available to you, there are a total of 2 to the power n different combinations of zeros and ones. Nothing more than 2 to the power n can actually be stored in any n bit storage. So let us take the example of a character. Usually on most machines, character would take up just 1 byte, that is 8 bits in memory, and this means that I have 256 different possibilities. So in theory I can actually store 256 different characters in a char. Usually what we do is we simply we store the ASCII value. Okay, so the ASCII representation, remember what ASCII is. So ASCII is a 7-bit code. So it's quite clear, right? So because it is only 7 bits, and I'm using 8 bits here, I can easily represent all the characters that are there in the ASCII range using a char. And similarly, if I actually use a short, so short is another data type that we have not explicitly talked about, but usually it occupies 2 bytes on machines. It's kind of a short integer, to be honest. So for a short, you have a total of 2 to the power 16, that is 65,536 different values. Now, based on the kind of representation that you're using, usually it is the 2's complement representation. um, what happens is this whole range has to be used for representing the integer, a short integer. So what it means is that we are going to split this whole range over positive and negative values. What does it mean? If you actually check the range of short, it is something like this: minus 32,768 to 32,767. And if you add 0 to this and add them up, you will basically get the same number, 65,536. So essentially, a short can only represent these many number of integers in the memory, and this is why its range looks something like this. Now what you can do is, in some languages like C, you can basically say, okay, my short variable is unsigned. So what it means by unsigned is that I'm not going to use the negative range of the numbers, so please increase my positive range. So what happens is, if you make this short variable unsigned, its range shifts, right? So it starts from 0 and then it goes up to 65,535. Again, if you see the total number of possible values that a short can take, it remains the same. It's just that when you declare it unsigned, its range actually shifts on the positive side. So this is another idea that you have to understand, that ranges are defined by the number of bits that you have in order to store that particular value. Now we have seen something known as typecasting. Again, there were some questions in the quizzes as well. So what really happens when two operands of different types are used in an expression or assignment? So different languages have different mechanisms to handle such scenarios, right? Usually these mechanisms involves converting almost all the other operands into one single type, so that then the operation can be easily performed over that particular type. This conversion can actually be implicit in many cases. So this means that you don't have to do anything, the compiler will do it automatically. Implicit conversions usually aim to promote types of smaller ranges to that with a higher range. So this is the idea, that if I have a data type whose range is higher, which can, and then I have another data type whose range is a subset of this higher range, then I can simply use I can convert the smaller range data type to the larger range data type, higher range data type, without any harm. um, but sometimes, in certain cases, and you guys might have already done that in your labs, you have to actually do the opposite. For example, you may have to typecast, convert a floating type variable or a double type variable to an integer, right? So we use something known as typecasting or type conversions, and this is a kind of explicit change in the type of a particular value, or the current value of a variable. So what happens is, using typecasting, what we do is, we actually try to change the value itself, the type of the value itself, to something else. Okay, now the actual behavior of typecasting will differ widely from one language to another, from one implementation to another. As well as, let us say, what type you are trying to typecast to another type. For example, if you are trying to typecast a real number, a floating or a double type number, into an integer, what happens is, it simply uh, cuts off the integer, the decimal part. Okay, many people feel that if I convert a double or a float to an integer, it will be rounded off, but no, that doesn't happen. This is the behavior that the typecast behavior, when you are trying to typecast a double or a float to integer, is that simply the decimal part is truncated, so you only get the integer part. Now, usually the compiler tries to perform implicit conversions in such a way that there is no loss of precision. This is important, that the compiler tries its best, to be honest, to keep things in perspective. So usually that is why implicit typecasting converts a data type of narrower range to a higher range. That is what I just said before. But there are some exceptions. So for example, the constants that we use in C. Okay, if you are using a real number constant which has a decimal point, by default it is a double. But if you try to write something like float f equal to 2.5, what is really happening is that there is a double type of constant 2.5, and then it has to be typecasted to a float. Okay, it's basically an operation where you are losing precision from double to float, but that too is implicit, right? So there are certain cases where the typecast can be from a higher range data type to a lower range data type as well. But usually what happens is that the compiler tries its best to preserve your precision. There's one more operator in C which we have not really discussed in the class, and we are going to use this operator quite often once we study pointers. So I thought I'll just introduce it to you. So one of the problems we see is that a lot of things are implementation specific. So what it means is that it will differ from one machine to another machine, one compiler to another compiler, and the most common problem in this regard is the sizes of the different data types. Okay, so for example, the machines over which I learnt C programming, they used to have int. The size of int on those machines used to be just 2 bytes, but the current compilers that I'm using, they all have 4 bytes for int. So anyhow, so the point is that the data types and the size of different data types may differ from one machine to another. So what you do have in C is something known as the size of operator, and this operator, by the way, is also available in C++ and Java, so you can try it there as well. So what this operator can do is you can use it with type arguments such as int or double. So you can give it a type as argument, size of int, size of double, something like this, and it will tell you exactly how much space does it take on your machine. You can use it with different types of variables. Again, the variables, what really happens is with the variable, it just gives you the same value as the type of that variable. Another thing that it can do is it can actually give you size of for expressions. Okay, so what you can do is you can write certain expressions which have variables of different types, and then you can put it in the size of operator, and this will actually tell you a very good this will give you a very good idea of how implicit conversions by compiler takes place. So this is a simple example. I can use it like this, that and by the way, LU is long unsigned. So this is the type of value that that size of returns. At least on the machine that I used, it was LU. It could be something else on other implementations. But the idea is something like this, that if I use size of int, it comes out to be 4 on my machine. Similarly, I can use size of float, size of double, which is 4 and 8 respectively. I can also do something like this, right? So I is essentially integer type and C is a character type. I am saying I plus C. So this is an expression which has an integer and a character, and the implicit conversion actually makes this the result as an integer, and that is why I get 4 here. Similarly, I have an integer and a float, again because both take up same amount of space on my machine. You cannot differentiate, but here you can differentiate. One is an integer, this one is actually a double, and if I do I plus t, the final result is getting typecasted to a double. So the size of the result is 8 bytes. So you can use this size of operator to write certain expressions and then figure out what is the size of that expression, right? So then it will tell you that what is the type conversion rule that is being used there. What type does the result gets converted to. You can use, for example, this for integer division. You can do I by I I by j, where I and j both are integers, and you can see that that it doesn't become double, for example. It'll remain an int. Anyhow, so this is one way to use size of this, and we will use size of more frequently when we start studying pointers. Okay, There is some homework, have a look at it. This is a short lecture, but we will discuss this on Wednesday. Okay, bye.